Park Woo gripped the controls of his ship as another explosion lit up the darkness around him. The debris field stretched in every direction, twisted metal and broken ships floating like a graveyard in space. He had come here for a simple job: pick up some cargo, deliver it to the next system, get paid. Easy money for a former Earth Marine who knew how to keep his mouth shut and his ship flying. But nothing was ever that simple in the Kepler sector. His ship, the Soul's Pride, was old, but reliable. Wu had spent years fixing her up, adding armor here, upgrading weapons there. She wasn't the fastest ship in space, but she could take a beating and keep going. Just like her pilot. The radio crackled with static, then a voice broke through. It was speaking in the musical language of the Stellan Empire, but Wu's translator picked up the words. Mayday, mayday. This is Royal Transport Starlight requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack. Our engines are failing. Princess Vara is aboard. Repeat, Princess Vara is aboard. Wu frowned. Princess Vara, he had heard that name before. The heir to the Stellan throne, barely 20 years old in human terms. The Stellans were one of the few alien races that got along with humans. They paid well and kept their word. But getting involved in royal business was a good way to end up dead. Another voice cut through the static, harsh and guttural. The Corvin Federation. Surrender the Princess Stellan dogs. Your empire's time is over. We will take her alive or dead. Through his cockpit window, Wu could see the battle. 3 Corvin warships had surrounded a single Stellan vessel. The Stellan ship was beautiful, all flowing curves and crystal panels that caught the light of nearby stars. But it was also badly damaged. Atmosphere was leaking from several holes in its hull, and one of its engine pods was completely gone. The Stellan escort ships were nowhere to be seen. Probably destroyed already. Wu should have turned around. This wasn't his fight. He was just a human mercenary trying to make a living on the edge of known space. Getting between the Corvins and their prize would only get him killed. But as he watched, one of the Corvin ships fired a weapon that sent blue energy crackling across the Stellan vessel's hull. The princess's ship shuddered and began to drift. Soon it would be helpless, damn it, Wu muttered. He couldn't just watch. He pushed the Soul's Pride forward, staying in the shadow of a large piece of wreckage. The Corvins were so focused on their prize that they didn't notice one small human ship moving through the debris. Wu activated his communication system and sent a message on an open channel. This is Captain Park Wu of the Soul's Pride. I'm here to help. The response from the Stellan ship came quickly. The voice was young and female, speaking accented but clear human English. Captain Wu, this is Princess Vera. We are grateful for any assistance, but our situation is hopeless. Please do not risk your life for us. Too late for that, Princess, Wu replied. He was already plotting an attack run on the nearest Corvin ship. The Corvins were big, ugly vessels covered in spikes and weapon ports. They looked like someone had taken a chunk of dark metal and stuck guns all over it. But they were also old designs, built for intimidation rather than efficiency. Wu knew their weakness. He angled the Soul's Pride toward the lead Corvin ship and pushed his engines to maximum power. The ship shot forward like a bullet, staying low among the debris until the last second. The Corvins spotted him just as he opened fire. His lasers weren't powerful enough to punch through their heavy armor, but that wasn't the plan. Instead, he targeted their sensor arrays and communication dishes. Sparks flew as his weapons found their mark. The Corvin ship spun around to face him, its massive guns swinging toward his tiny ship, but Wu was already gone, diving under the vessel and coming up on the other side. The second Corvin ship tried to intercept him, but Wu did something no sane pilot would attempt. He flew straight at the ship's main gun, waiting until the last possible second before spinning away. The Corvin weapon fired, but instead of hitting the Soul's Pride, the energy beam struck the first Corvin ship. What is that human doing? One of the Corvin captains shouted over the radio. Wu smiled. Humans had a reputation among aliens for being unpredictable. Crazy even. Today he was going to live up to that reputation. He swung around toward the third Corvin ship, the one closest to the princess's vessel. This one was already moving to dock with the Stellan ship. Wu couldn't let that happen. He pushed his engines beyond their safety limits. The Soul's Pride groaned and shook, but she held together. Warning lights flashed all over his control panel, but Wu ignored them. The Corvin ship was huge compared to his fighter. Ramming it would be suicide. But Wu wasn't planning to ram the ship itself. At the last second, he pulled up and slammed into the ship's docking tube. The flexible metal tube crumpled and tore away from the ship's hull. Atmosphere rushed out into space and the Corvin ship was forced to seal its airlock. The Soul's Pride tumbled away, her hull scraped and dented but intact. Wu fought to regain control as the two remaining Corvin ships converged on his position. "Princess," he called over the radio. "Can your ship move at all?" "We have minimal maneuvering thrusters only," came the reply. "Our main engines are destroyed. That'll have to do. I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, head for that asteroid field to the north. Hide in there until help arrives. But Captain Wu, you cannot fight two warships alone." Wu checked his weapons and shields. Both were running low. His ship was damaged and his engines were overheating. By any reasonable calculation, he was about to die, but humans weren't always reasonable. "Watch me," he said. He turned the Soul's Pride toward the two Corvin ships and began broadcasting on all frequencies. Not words, but music. An old human song his grandmother used to sing. Something about never giving up. The Corvins were confused. What was this human doing? Why was he playing music while flying to his death? Wu waited until both ships were firing at him, their weapons lighting up space around his ship. Then he did something completely insane. He shut off his engines and let momentum carry him forward while he rolled his ship like a spinning coin. The Corvin weapons, designed to track normal flight patterns, couldn't get a lock on the wildly spinning target. Most of their shots missed, and the few that hit were deflected by the ship's rotation. As he spun between the two warships, Wu fired everything he had left. Not at their hulls, but at their weapon systems. Laser turrets exploded in showers of sparks. Missile launchers went dark. By the time the Soul's Pride came out the other side, both Corvin ships were damaged and confused. Their captains were shouting at each other, trying to figure out what had just happened. And the princess's ship was gone, safely hidden in the asteroid field. Wu restarted his engines and limped away into the debris field. Behind him, the Corvin ships eventually gave up their search and withdrew. They had failed to capture their prize, and word of their failure would spread throughout the sector. An hour later, Stellan rescue ships arrived to pick up the princess. But before they took her away, Princess Vera sent one final message to the Soul's Pride. "Captain Park Wu, you have the gratitude of the Stellan Empire. What you did today will not be forgotten." Wu looked out at the stars and smiled. He had come here for easy money, but he was leaving with something more valuable. He had done the right thing even when it wasn't the smart thing. That was what made humans different from the other races in the galaxy. When others calculated odds and probabilities, humans listened to their hearts. And sometimes the heart knew things that the mind couldn't understand. 2 weeks after the rescue, Park Wu found himself standing in the most beautiful place he had ever seen. The Stellan capital city of Altheria stretched before him like something from a dream. Crystal towers reached up into purple skies, their surfaces catching and reflecting light in patterns that seemed to dance. Flying vehicles moved between the towers in graceful arcs, leaving trails of silver light behind them. But Wu felt completely out of place. He was wearing his best clothes, which meant clean military pants and a jacket without any holes in it. Around him, alien beings moved in flowing robes that changed color as they walked. Some had skin that sparkled like diamonds. Others seemed to be made of pure light. A few looked almost human, except for the extra arms or the fact that they floated instead of walking. Princess Vera walked beside him, her own robes shifting from deep blue to soft gold as they moved through the palace corridors. She had insisted on bringing him here personally, despite the protests of her guards. "Do not worry, Captain Wu," she said in her musical voice. "My mother will be grateful for what you did." Wu wasn't so sure about that. He had met queens and presidents before, back when he was a Marine. They usually didn't like soldiers who broke the rules, even when breaking the rules saved lives. The throne room was even more impressive than the rest of the palace. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that showed images of distant stars and planets. The ceiling seemed to open up into space itself, showing the real night sky above the city. Queen Lysia sat on a throne that looked like it was carved from a single massive gemstone. She was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to glow from within. Her hair moved like water, and her eyes were the deep purple of the sky outside. Other aliens filled the room. Wu recognized some of the species from his travels. The insect-like Chitauri stood in one corner, their forearms moving in complex patterns as they talked. Near them, beings of pure energy flickered and shifted, communicating through flashes of light. In the center of the room, Several creatures that looked like they belonged underwater moved in floating bubbles of liquid. All of them were staring at Wu. The Queen spoke, and her voice filled the room without being loud. "Captain Park Wu of Earth, you have done our family a great service. What reward do you seek?" Wu had thought about this question during the long trip to Altheria. He could ask for money or a better ship or even citizenship in the Stellan Empire. But looking at the Queen, he realized there was only one answer that felt right. "I don't want a reward, Your Majesty. I just did what anyone should do." A ripple of surprise went through the room. Several aliens began speaking at once in languages Wu couldn't understand. The Queen raised her hand and silence fell immediately. "Interesting," she said. "Most beings who save the life of a princess expect something in return." Before Wu could answer, a new voice spoke from the back of the room. "Perhaps this human expects something later. When the price is higher." Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was an alien Wu didn't recognize, tall and thin with gray skin and too many teeth. The creature's eyes were completely black, and when it smiled, Wu felt a chill run down his spine. "Ambassador Keel," Princess Vera said, and her voice was cold. "Why do you speak against our honored guest?" Ambassador Keel stepped forward, his movements smooth and predatory. "I speak only truth, Princess. Humans are known throughout the galaxy for their opportunism. This one probably calculated that saving you would bring him greater profit than selling you to my people." Wu felt his hands clench into fists. "Your people? Your Corvin?" "I am here under a flag of truce," Keel said, showing those terrible teeth again, "to negotiate the return of certain stolen property." "If you mean the princess," Wu said, "she's not property. She's a person." The ambassador laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How very human. You see people where others see resources. It is a weakness that will destroy your species." Queen Lycia stood up from her throne. "Ambassador Keel, you forget yourself. Captain Wu is here as our guest." "Of course, Your Majesty," Keel said, bowing low, but his black eyes never left Wu's face. "I merely point out that trusting humans can be dangerous." The ceremony continued, but Wu barely paid attention. He was watching Ambassador Keel, and he didn't like what he saw. The alien moved wrong like a predator pretending to be harmless. His eyes kept flicking toward the princess, and his hand kept moving toward something hidden under his robes. Wu had seen that behavior before, in enemy soldiers who were planning something bad. The formal part of the ceremony ended, and the aliens began to mingle and talk. Princess Vara was surrounded by well-wishers, accepting congratulations and gifts. Queen Lycia moved through the crowd, speaking with various ambassadors and nobles. Wu stayed where he was, watching Keel. The Corvin ambassador was talking to a group of other aliens, his voice too low to hear clearly. But Wu could see his body language, and it was all wrong. Keel was tense, ready to move. His hand was definitely on a weapon now. The attack came without warning. Keel suddenly pulled a device from his robes and pointed it at Princess Vera. Energy began to build around the weapon, crackling with deadly power. The other aliens froze, too shocked to react. But Wu was already moving. He had been a Marine for 8 years before becoming a mercenary. In all that time, he had learned one important lesson. When someone is about to shoot, you don't think. You act. Wu tackled Princess Vera, knocking her to the ground just as Keel's weapon fired. The energy beam passed through the space where she had been standing and struck the crystal wall behind her. The wall exploded in a shower of sparks and broken stone. Wu rolled to his feet and charged at Keel. The ambassador was already preparing a second shot, but he was thinking like a politician, not a soldier. He aimed carefully, trying to get a clean shot at the princess. Wu hit him like a truck. They went down together, fighting for control of the weapon. Keel was stronger than he looked, and his gray skin was tough as armor. But Wu had learned to fight dirty in back alley bars and forgotten battlefields. He grabbed Keel's weapon hand and slammed it against the floor until the alien's fingers opened. The device skittered away across the crystal floor. "Guards!" Queen Lysia shouted, but Wu was already finishing the fight. He pinned Keel to the ground and looked around for something to tie him up with. The Stellan guards finally arrived, along with security forces from several other species. They surrounded Keel, weapons drawn. But the damage was done. An assassination attempt had been made in the Queen's own throne room, and only the quick action of a human had prevented it. As they dragged Keel away, the Corvin ambassador looked back at Wu. "This changes nothing, human. We will have what we came for." Good luck with that, Wu replied. Later, as the throne room was being repaired and the other aliens were giving their statements to the guards, Queen Lycia approached Wu. Princess Vara was with her, looking shaken but unhurt. Captain Wu, the queen said, once again you have saved my daughter's life. But this time you have also saved the honor of our court. Had Ambassador Keel succeeded, it would have meant war between our peoples. Wu shrugged. I just saw someone with a gun pointed at the princess. Didn't really think about it. Exactly, Queen Lycia said. You acted on instinct without hesitation. Most beings would have calculated the risks, considered the political consequences, worried about their own safety. But you simply did what was right. Princess Vera stepped forward. Mother, I believe Captain Wu possesses something we have forgotten in our court. He has honor without complexity. The queen nodded slowly. Perhaps you are right, daughter. Captain Wu, I have a proposition for you. Stay with us. Serve as my daughter's guardian. Learn our ways and teach us yours. Wu looked around the throne room, at the crystal walls and the alien beings and the sky full of stars. It was beautiful and strange and completely unlike anything he had ever known. But Princess Vera was looking at him with hope in her eyes. And Queen Lycia was offering him something he had never expected, a chance to belong somewhere. All right, he said. I'll stay, but I do things my way. Queen Lycia smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the palace, Wu felt like he might actually fit in here, even if he was just a human among the stars. Park Wu had been living in the palace for a month, when Queen Lycia summoned him to her private chambers. The room was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive, with walls that showed moving pictures of Stellan history. Ancient battles played out in slow motion across the crystal surfaces, warriors fighting with weapons of light and energy. The queen stood by a window that looked out over the city. Without her formal robes, she looked younger, more like her daughter. But her eyes still held the weight of ruling an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. Captain Wu, she said without turning around, do you know why I asked you to stay? Wu had been wondering about that himself. To protect the princess, I thought. That is part of it. But there is more. Queen Lycia finally turned to face him. For centuries, the royal guard has been filled with the strongest and most skilled warriors from across our empire. But they think like we think. They see threats we would see and miss the ones we would miss. She walked to a table where an ancient book lay open. The pages seemed to glow with their own light, and the writing moved like living things. You see threats differently, she continued. You act without the burden of our traditions and expectations. This makes you valuable. But it also makes the court nervous. Wu could understand that. He had been getting strange looks from the other palace guards. They were all aliens from different species. But they had one thing in common. They all thought he didn't belong here. Some members of the court have questioned my decision to bring a human into the royal guard, Queen Lycia said. They believe you lack the proper qualities for such an honor. Maybe they're right, Wu said. I'm not exactly palace material, the queen smiled. Perhaps not, but there is a way to settle the matter. The trial of bonds is an ancient test that has determined membership in the royal guard for over 1,000 years. No one has passed it in 3 centuries. No human has ever attempted it. Wu felt a familiar tightness in his stomach. What kind of test? 3 challenges, each designed to test a different aspect of what we value in a guardian. Mental strength, spiritual harmony, and physical prowess. Queen Lycia closed the ancient book. You may refuse, of course. But if you fail, you will be asked to leave the palace. If you succeed, no one can question your place here again. Wu thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. When do we start? 2 days later, Wu stood in a chamber deep beneath the palace. With him were Lite and Choi Mira, 2 other humans who had arrived on a diplomatic transport the day before. Li was a short, stocky man with clever hands and an engineer's mind. Choi was quiet and sharp-eyed, the kind of person who noticed everything and forgot nothing. I still think this is crazy, Li said, adjusting a device on his belt. These tests were designed for aliens. We don't even know what we're walking into. That's what makes it interesting, Mira replied. She was studying a wall covered in Stellan symbols. According to my research, the first test is called the Maze of Fears. It's supposed to show you your worst nightmares and see if you can overcome them. Wu nodded. He had faced his fears before in combat zones and dark places between the stars. How hard could it be? The answer, it turned out, was very hard. The moment Wu stepped into the maze, the world changed around him. The crystal walls became the metal corridors of a space station. Emergency lights flashed red and alarms wailed in the distance. He could smell smoke and hear the sound of weapons fire. He was back on Station Echo watching his squad die all over again. The illusion was perfect. Every detail was exactly as he remembered from that terrible day 8 years ago. His teammates called his name, begging for help that never came. Enemy soldiers appeared around every corner, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, but this time, Wu knew it wasn't real. He had spent years blaming himself for what happened on Station Echo. Years wondering if he could have done something different, saved more people, been a better soldier. The maze wanted him to feel that guilt again, to break down under the weight of his failures. Instead, Wu got angry. "This is not real," he said out loud, his voice echoing off the walls. "My friends are dead and I can't change that. But I can make sure it doesn't happen again." He walked forward, ignoring the illusions around him. When enemy soldiers appeared, he walked through them. When his dead friends called to him, he kept moving. The maze tried to confuse him with false paths and impossible geography. But Wu simply picked a direction and stuck with it. Anger. It turned out was a good compass. After what felt like hours, he emerged from the maze to find Lee and Mira waiting for him. Lee looked pale and shaky. Mira was sitting on the ground, her head in her hands. "That was horrible," Lee muttered. "I saw my family dying in an engineering accident I couldn't prevent." "Failure," Mira whispered. "Every mission I ever failed, every person I couldn't save. But they had all made it through. Whatever the maze had shown them, they had found the strength to keep going." The second test was held in a chamber filled with enormous crystals that hummed with energy. In the center of the room sat a single crystal the size of a person, its surface smooth and dark. "This is the heart of harmony," explained the Stellan priest who guided them. "It reflects the true nature of one's spirit. Place your hand upon it and it will show all present what lies within your soul." Lee went first. When he touched the crystal, it glowed with warm yellow light, showing images of machines and tools and the satisfaction of building something that worked. The priest nodded approvingly. Mira's touch brought cool blue light and images of information flowing like water, secrets being gathered and protected. Again, the priest seemed pleased. Then it was Wu's turn. He placed his hand on the crystal and waited. Nothing happened for a long moment. The priest frowned, checking the crystal for damage. Then slowly the crystal began to glow. Not with any single color, but with a warm white light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The images that appeared were simple. A child being protected from bullies, a ship rescuing survivors from a wreck, a soldier sharing his food with prisoners. The priest's eyes went wide. "Impossible," he whispered. "The crystal shows only purity of purpose. Such a reading has not been seen in centuries." "What does it mean?" Wu asked. "It means you do not fight for glory or reward or even duty," the priest replied. "You fight because it is right to fight. You protect because protection is needed. The crystal recognizes this as the truest form of harmony." The final test was simpler and more direct. Combat. Commander Thex was the Queen's champion, a warrior from a species that looked like walking tanks. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like metal plates. His weapons were energy blades that could cut through almost anything. The combat arena was a circle of sand surrounded by seats where palace officials watched in silence. Queen Lycia sat in the royal box with Princess Vara beside her. The princess looked worried. "You may yield at any time," Commander Thex said as they faced each other in the center of the arena. "I do not wish to seriously injure you." "Thanks," Wu replied. "I'll keep that in mind." The fight began with Thex charging forward, his forearms moving in perfect coordination. His energy blades left trails of light as they cut through the air where Wu had been standing. But Wu wasn't there anymore. He had learned long ago that fighting something bigger and stronger than you meant not fighting fair. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at Thex's eyes. While the commander was blinking away the grit, Wu rolled between his legs and came up behind him. A quick kick to the back of the knee sent the big alien stumbling forward. Thex spun around, angry now. His blades moved faster, forcing Wu to dodge and weave around the arena. The alien was skilled and strong, but he fought with honor and tradition. Wu fought to win. He used the arena itself as a weapon, kicking sand into the air to obscure vision and running up the walls to attack from unexpected angles. When Thex tried to corner him, Wu dropped flat and rolled under the alien's guard to strike at pressure points Lee had identified in the species' anatomy. The end came when Thex, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit, overextended himself in a powerful attack. Wu sidestepped the blow and grabbed one of the alien's arms, using the commander's own momentum to throw him to the ground. Thex hit the sand hard and lay still for a moment, the wind knocked out of him. When he tried to get up, he found Wu standing over him with one of the fallen energy blades pointed at his throat. "Yield," Wu said quietly. Thex looked up at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I yield." The arena erupted in surprised chatter. No one had defeated Commander Thex in over 50 years, and certainly no one had done it using such unorthodox tactics. Queen Lycia stood up in the royal box. "The trial of bonds is complete," she announced. "Captain Park Wu has passed all 3 tests. Let no one question his place in the royal guard again." As the crowd began to disperse, Princess Vara came down to the arena floor. "That was amazing," she said, "but also terrifying. You fight like nothing I've ever seen." "I fight like a human," Wu replied. "We do what works, not what looks good." "Perhaps that is what we need more of," the princess said thoughtfully. "Practical solutions instead of traditional ones." Wu looked around the arena, at the alien officials talking excitedly among themselves, at Commander. The emergency meeting was called at dawn, 3 days after Wu completed the trial of bonds. He was escorted to a room he had never seen before, deep in the palace where the walls were made of plain metal instead of beautiful crystal. This was the war room, and it looked like war rooms everywhere, practical, serious, and full of maps. Queen Lycia stood at the center of a holographic display showing the entire Kepler sector. Red dots marked enemy positions, blue ones showed friendly forces, and yellow indicated unknown contacts. There were a lot more red dots than blue ones. Around the table sat representatives from the allied species. Wu recognized some of them from the throne room ceremony, but seeing them here was different. These weren't diplomats in fancy clothes. These were military leaders, and they all looked worried. "Captain Wu," Queen Lycia said without looking away from the display, "intelligence reports indicate that the Corvan Federation has assembled the largest fleet in their history. Over 200 warships massing at the edge of our territory." Princess Vera stood beside her mother, wearing simple military clothes instead of her usual flowing robes. "They're not just planning to raid our ships anymore," she said. "This is an invasion force." Commander Thex, still wearing bandages from their fight in the arena, gestured to the holographic display. "Our scouts estimate they will reach our border worlds within 10 days. We have perhaps 60 ships that can respond in time." The insectoid Chitauri representative clicked its mandibles together nervously. When it spoke, its voice came through a translator device. "The collective can provide 30 hive ships, but they are designed for coordination, not heavy combat." A being of pure energy flickered brighter as it communicated through flashes of light. Wu's translator interpreted the message. "The Luminal Confederation offers energy-based weapons and defensive screens, but our forms are not suited to ship-to-ship combat." The aquatic representative floating in its bubble of water spoke in deep rumbling tones. "The Depths Coalition will provide stealth support and underwater operations, but space battles are not our strength." Wu listened to each species explain what they could offer, and more importantly, what they couldn't do. Each group was powerful in their own way, but they were all thinking in terms of their biological advantages and traditional tactics. "What about direct assault?" asked Commander Thex. "We gather all available ships and meet them in honorable battle." The Chitauri representative's forearms moved in agitation. "Impossible. They outnumber us 3-1. The hive mind calculates a 12% chance of victory." "Then we fall back to fortified positions," suggested the energy being. "Make them come to us where our defenses are strongest." "That abandons our outer colonies," Princess Vara pointed out. "Millions of civilians would be left defenseless." "Perhaps we should consider negotiation," the aquatic representative said slowly. "Offer them something they want more than conquest." Queen Lycia's expression grew cold. "They want the princess, alive or dead according to their last message. That is not negotiable." Wu had been quiet through all of this, studying the holographic display and listening to the discussion. Finally, he spoke up. "You're all thinking about this wrong." The room went silent. All eyes turned to the human who had just criticized the military leaders of 4 different species. "Explain," Queen Lycia said. Wu stood up and walked to the display. "You're trying to fight their strength with your strength, but they're stronger. So you lose. He pointed to the red dots representing the Corvan fleet. But what if you don't fight their fleet at all? Commander Thex frowned. The fleet is the threat. How do we defend against invasion without fighting the invaders? You make them not want to invade, Wu said. Or make them unable to invade. Same result, different method. The Chitauri representative's translator crackled as it spoke. Clarification requested. How does one prevent invasion without defeating invasion force? Wu smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Li, remember what you told me about ship engines? Li Te, who had been standing quietly in the corner, perked up. That most alien ship designs have centralized power systems? Yeah, take out the main reactor and the whole ship goes dark. And Mira, what did your intelligence report say about Corvan fleet organization? Choi Mira stepped forward, consulting a data pad. Highly hierarchical. All tactical decisions flow from the command ship to individual vessels. Cut communications and the fleet becomes uncoordinated. Wu turned back to the holographic display. So instead of trying to destroy 200 warships, we target a few key systems. Power and communications. Make the fleet helpless instead of defeated. The energy being flickered rapidly. Impossible. Corvan ships are heavily defended. No small force could penetrate their formations to reach critical targets. Not from outside, Wu agreed. But what about from inside? Queen Lysia stepped closer to the display. Continue. The Corvans are expecting a traditional battle. Line up ships, exchange fire until one side retreats or dies. They won't be prepared for boarding actions and sabotage. Wu highlighted several of the red dots. Small teams, maybe 2 or 3 people each, infiltrate key ships during the confusion of battle. Disable engines and communication arrays from within. This is madness, Commander Thex said. How would these teams even reach the enemy ships? Same way I rescued the princess, Wu replied. Hide among the wreckage, use captured ships, take advantage of chaos. Corvans think in terms of honor and direct confrontation. They won't expect sneaky tactics. The Chitauri representative was quiet for a long moment, its compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. Finally, it spoke. The hive mind finds merit in this approach. Unconventional tactics have high probability of success against rigid command structures. But it would require perfect timing, the aquatic representative pointed out, and considerable risk to the infiltration teams. Everything worth doing is risky, Wu said. But this gives us a chance. A straight fight just gets everyone killed. Princess Vara had been studying the display while the others talked. It could work, she said slowly. But it would need to be coordinated perfectly, and someone would have to get close enough to their command ship to... She stopped, looking at Wu. You're planning to use me as bait again, aren't you? Not bait, Wu corrected. More like irresistible target. The Corvan commander will want to capture you personally. That means bringing his command ship in close enough for a small team to board it. Queen Lysia was quiet for a long time, staring at the display. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of command. You are asking me to risk my daughter's life on a plan that has never been attempted before. I'm asking you to trust humans to do what humans do best, Wu replied. Improvise, adapt, and win by changing the rules. The Queen looked around the room at her allies. Each species had their strengths, but they were all constrained by their own natures and traditions. The Chitauri thought in terms of coordinated group action. The energy beings preferred elegant, symmetrical solutions. The aquatic species favored patient, long-term strategies. Only the humans thought in terms of pure pragmatism. Very well, Queen Lysia said finally. We will attempt this plan, but with modifications. Princess Vara will indeed serve as bait, but she will be protected by our best defenses, including you, Captain Wu. And if it doesn't work? Commander Thex asked. Wu shrugged. Then we're in the same position we'd be in anyway, except maybe we take a few of them with us. The meeting continued for several more hours as they worked out the details. Which ships would be used, how the teams would be equipped, what signals would coordinate the attack. It was complex and dangerous with a dozen things that could go wrong. But for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope in the room. As the other representatives filed out to prepare their forces, Princess Vara approached Wu. You know this plan requires you to board the Corvan command ship directly, she said. The most dangerous assignment. Somebody has to do it, Wu replied. Might as well be me. Why? She asked. You could stay with the fleet, coordinate from a safe distance. You don't have to take the biggest risk yourself. Wu looked at the holographic display, still showing the red dots of the enemy fleet approaching their world. Because that's not how humans work. We don't ask others to take risks we won't take ourselves. Princess Vera smiled. I am beginning to understand why my mother values your counsel. You think like a warrior, but you care like a protector. I just do what needs doing, Wu said, same as anyone. But as he left the war room to begin preparations, he knew that wasn't quite true. Not everyone was willing to throw themselves into impossible situations for people they barely knew. That was a human thing. And in a galaxy full of logical, careful traditional thinkers, being human might just be enough to win a war. The battle began exactly as the Corvan Federation expected it to. Their massive fleet of 200 warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Altheria system, arranged in perfect formation. Admiral Vask, the Corvan commander, watched from his flagship as the much smaller Stellan Defense Force moved to intercept them. 60 ships against 200, his tactical officer reported. They cannot hope to win, Admiral Vask smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. They fight because they have no choice. Honor demands it even in defeat. He activated the ship's communication system. Stellan Fleet, this is Admiral Vask of the Corvan Federation. Surrender, Princess Vara, and your deaths will be quick. The response came from Queen Lysia herself, her voice calm and dignified. Admiral Vask, this is Queen Lysia of the Stellan Empire. We reject your demands. If you want our princess, you will have to come and take her. So be it, Vask replied. He turned to his bridge crew. All ships advance in formation. Destroy any vessel that resists. What followed looked like a conventional space battle. The two fleets met in the empty space between planets, exchanging fire with weapons that turned the darkness into a light show of explosions and energy beams. The Stellan ships fought bravely, but they were clearly outmatched. Admiral Vask watched with satisfaction as his superior numbers began to tell. Stellan ships were damaged and destroyed, their debris adding to the growing field of wreckage between the fleets. Soon the defenders would be forced to retreat, and then the real invasion could begin. But something was wrong. Admiral, his communications officer called out, I'm receiving strange signals from several of our ships. They appear to be music. Vask frowned. What kind of music? Before anyone could answer, the ship shook from an internal explosion. Emergency lights began flashing and alarms wailed throughout the bridge. Report, Vask shouted. Internal explosion in the engine room, sir. We've lost main power. Another explosion. This time in the communications section, the main display went dark, cutting off their view of the battle. Sir, a panicked voice called from across the bridge. There are humans aboard the ship. Park Wu emerged from the ventilation shaft behind the Admiral's chair, followed by Li Te and two Stellan commandos. They moved fast, stunning the bridge crew with small energy weapons before anyone could react. Admiral Vask, Wu said, pointing his weapon at the Corvan commander. I'm here to accept your surrender. Vask snarled and reached for his sidearm, but Wu was faster. The stunner beam dropped the Admiral to the deck, unconscious. Li, how long until you can access their communication system? Wu asked. Give me 2 minutes, Li replied, already working at a control panel. Maybe 3 if their security is better than usual. Through the broken windows of the bridge, Wu could see the battle continuing. But it wasn't going according to the Corvan plan anymore. Several of their ships were drifting powerless, victims of other infiltration teams. The tight formation that had been their strength was becoming a weakness as disabled ships created obstacles for the rest of the fleet. Got it, Li announced. I'm patched into their fleet communication network. Good. Mira, you're up. Choi Mira stepped forward and began speaking into the communication system. But she wasn't speaking in her own voice. Using a device that altered her vocal patterns, she sounded exactly like Admiral Vask. All ships, this is Admiral Vask, she said in perfect Corvan military dialect. The humans have deployed some kind of new weapon. All vessels are to retreat immediately to Rally Point 7. Confusion spread through the Corvan fleet. Some ships began to turn away from the battle, following what they thought were orders from their commander. Others continued fighting, unsure what to believe. The confusion grew worse when other infiltration teams began broadcasting their own false orders. Ship captains received contradictory commands, telling them to advance, retreat, regroup, and attack different targets all at the same time. This is working better than I hoped, Wu said, watching the enemy fleet dissolve into chaos. But the plan wasn't finished yet. Princess Vara's ship, the royal transport that had been serving as bait, suddenly broke away from the main Stellan formation. It headed straight for the largest Corvin vessel, Admiral Vask's flagship. "Princess," Wu said into his communicator, "you're cutting it close." "I know," came her reply. "But the performance must be convincing." Several Corvin ships broke off from the confused fleet to pursue the princess. This was exactly what they had planned. As the enemy ships focused on their primary target, they left themselves vulnerable to the coordinated counterattack that was coming. The Chitauri hive ships, which had been hanging back and looking helpless, suddenly swarmed forward. Their coordinated movement was like watching a school of fish turn as one, beautiful and deadly. They surrounded the pursuing Corvin ships, their smaller size and perfect coordination, allowing them to strike at weak points that larger vessels couldn't reach. At the same time, the luminal energy beings abandoned their physical ship forms entirely. They became pure energy, flowing through space to disrupt Corvin power systems and weapons. What had looked like a retreat was actually a transformation into a completely different kind of warfare. The aquatic species revealed their own surprise. What the Corvins had thought were support vessels were actually mobile shipyards, manufacturing new drones and weapons even during the battle. Fresh Stellan fighters poured out of ships that should have been empty, piloted by artificial intelligences that learned and adapted with each passing minute. But the most effective weapon was confusion itself. With their command structure broken and their communications compromised, the Corvin fleet couldn't respond to the changing situation. Individual ship captains made their own decisions, but without coordination they were just targets for the Allied forces. "Sir," Lee called out from the communication station, "I'm reading massive power failures throughout their fleet. At least 60 ships are completely dead in space." Wu nodded. "Time for the final act. Put me on fleet-wide broadcast." Lee's fingers danced over the controls. "You're on." Wu activated the communication system and spoke in a clear, calm voice that reached every ship in both fleets. "This is Captain Park Wu of Earth, speaking for the Stellan Alliance. Corvin Federation fleet, you are defeated. Your admiral is captured, your ships are disabled, and your invasion has failed. Any vessel that surrenders now will be treated according to the laws of war. Any vessel that continues to fight will be destroyed." For a long moment, space was silent except for the crackling of damaged equipment and the distant explosions of dying ships. Then, one by one, Corvin ships began to surrender. It started with the damaged vessels, those that had no choice. But as word spread that Admiral Vask was truly captured and the fleet was genuinely beaten, even undamaged ships began to lower their weapons and request terms. Within an hour, the largest invasion fleet in Corvin history had become the largest mass surrender in galactic records. Later, as prisoners were processed and damaged ships were salvaged, Queen Lycia stood with her daughter on the observation deck of the royal palace. Through the crystal windows, they could see the wreckage of the battle being cleared from space. "Remarkable," the Queen said. "A force 1/3 the size of the enemy achieved total victory with minimal losses." Princess Vara smiled. It was Captain Wu's plan. Human thinking. "Yes," Queen Lycia agreed, "but it was more than just tactics. Your Captain Wu showed us something important about leadership." "What do you mean?" "He took the greatest risk himself. Boarded the enemy flagship, faced their admiral in person. Most commanders would have stayed safe while others carried out the dangerous work." Princess Vara nodded. "He says that's how humans are. They don't ask others to do what they won't do themselves. Perhaps that is why their methods work so well," the Queen mused. "When a leader is willing to share the danger, others are willing to follow into impossible situations." A few hours later, Wu found himself back in the throne room where his adventure had begun. But this time he wasn't alone. Representatives from a dozen different species had come to witness what Queen Lycia called a new chapter in galactic relations. "Captain Park Wu," the Queen announced formally. "You have served our empire with distinction and honor. You have saved my daughter's life twice, passed the trial of bonds, and led our forces to victory against overwhelming odds." She paused, letting her words echo through the crystal chamber. "Therefore, it is my pleasure to offer you the position of Special Ambassador to the human territories, with full diplomatic status and the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Stellan Empire." Wu looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him, A year ago, he had been a simple mercenary pilot trying to make a living on the edge of space. Now he was being offered a chance to shape relations between species across the galaxy. "I accept," he said simply. Princess Vara stepped forward, smiling, "And I volunteer to serve as his diplomatic partner. Someone needs to explain alien customs to him, and human customs to everyone else." Queen Lycia laughed, a sound like crystal chimes in the wind. "I think that is an excellent idea, daughter." As the formal ceremony continued, Wu reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was full of different species, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, their own ways of thinking.